So I just finished up PTSD Radio for the first time. This is a horror manga, and so it's billed as being for people who like Junji Ito and the like. And people seem to really like it. It gets a lot of great reviews. If you look on Goodreads, all of the volumes have high scores. It has its fair share of fans and defenders and people who really like it and are willing to recommend it. I'm not one of those people. A blurb on the back of the book promises that PTSD Radio is by far the creepiest and most creative horror series I've ever read. Unnerving horror that will stick with you. If you look at it, the covers are really cool. They all have these weird faces. Even the name is cool, PTSD Radio. That's a really weird and creative title, and so I really appreciate that about it. But the fact of the matter is just that I don't think this manga is very good at all. And the reason why is simple, because as the title of this video suggests, this is a manga wherein nothing happens for 1,000 pages. And honestly, that's quite an accomplishment. It's really actually shocking and surprising to see someone manage to pull that off. I mean, writing a story that lasts 1,000 pages is pretty incredible in the first place, but accomplishing nothing within that space, that's pretty amazing. And it sounds like I'm being very mean, and maybe I am. I am kind of sick right now, but really I think that my feelings would be exactly the same if I were 100% well. Because honestly, I'm just very frustrated by this manga. The story, and I use that term loosely, is told through a series of vignettes. Each chapter is something different, and there are about 100 chapters in total. And so each chapter just really jumps around from one character to the next, to the next, to the next, to the next. There aren't really any main characters, there's not really an overarching plot. Really, this is just a series of weird happenings. And what do I mean when I say weird happenings? Well, most of the stories can essentially be boiled down to just, I feel like there is something weird behind me. And then the person looks and there's nothing there behind them. And then whenever they turn around, you, the reader, see that there is indeed something weird behind them. Another type of story found across these 100 chapters is someone feeling like, that's a weird person standing there, and then they go and look at them, and then they have a weird face. This person's really ugly, or they have a weird smile. And the thing is that whenever I say that nothing happens for 1,000 pages, that's what I mean, is that the entire manga is just a series of strange incidents. It is almost always someone saw something weird. That's it. Or it's, oh, I heard a weird sound. And again, it sounds like I'm simplifying it. It sounds like I'm being mean to this manga. It sounds like I'm mocking it. I'm not. That's what the entire freaking thing is. With the exception of a plot line about a god that really never gets solved. And so the entire reason I kept reading this series was because I wanted to know what happened with that god statue. Scattered throughout the books is this plotline about a god. It's a weird statue that hides out in a forest. It involves hair and tying your hair to it, and it is heavily implied that it is responsible for a series of mishaps and may even be responsible for all of the events featured in every vignette. And you get an origin story for this god that happened a long time ago, wherein it was a nice god, and basically there were these two sisters, and one of them went running off trying to find their parents. So the older of the sisters, the one who wasn't lost, ended up tying her hair to the god. This girl prayed to the statue and wanted its help finding her sister. And after the girl had prayed, then she knew exactly where to go to find her sister. And they prayed to the god again together, and they were able to get home safely. And then the end of that chapter basically shows time passing, and it shows the god statue decaying and becoming a creepy statue as it appears in most other appearances in the series. And there are a handful of other interactions with the god statue. For instance, people want to remove it, but then they are cursed. And there is something about how there are people who are dropping dead in the forest or being hung as a result of messing around with that god statue. And you find these chapters scattered throughout the series. If I had to guess, I would say there are probably about 10 or 12 chapters that reference this god statue. Seeing as how this series is composed entirely of vignettes that jump from one character to the next, and seeing as how most of the enemies or the weird happenings, the ghosts, the strange animal creatures, seeing as how most of these don't really appear in other chapters, you're just kind of left to piece it together and be like, okay, I think it's all related to this god statue. But nothing is really ever explained, and you don't develop any connections to any characters because the story jumps from one thing to the next. And some of these stories are literally 3 or 4 pages long, and so as a result, it just feels like nothing happens. There's one story in this final volume wherein there's a security guard in a tower, and the security guard hears a weird sound, and then he shines his flashlight, and there's some weird creature there. And then that's it. The story ends, and it's on to the next thing. And that's what it's like for 1,000 pages. It's like we're speedrunning actual horror stories. Really, this entire series seems like an excuse for the writer to just kind of draw weird stuff. And some of the art's pretty cool, some of it's pretty interesting. And the reading experience is really interesting because there are some weird kind of meta overarching stories, I guess. And I use the term stories, again, very loosely. So for instance, in between vignettes, there is a page of something, and this something changes from volume to volume. In the first volume, what you see are these horrible lips coming at you and moving away from you, and there's like one image in between each story. And so if you put all these images together, then basically it shows a weird face, and then it shows them turning into a beautiful girl. And then also between individual chapters, there will be black pages, and they will have weird and esoteric text down at the bottom. And there will be sentences that essentially read like taglines. And you think they're building up to a poem or something, but they don't. From closed lips comes a song. The girl sings as she plucks up a brute. Climb the valley and burst into tears. Swear on a yesterday that's gone. Faces as folk tread each other's shadows. Tongues lolling to heels, they point. Snick and snack goes the gossip. And so at least to my ears, these lines don't really go together. It kind of seems like it at first, but then the further that you read, the less they actually make sense. And again, there's cool art throughout this, but seeing as how this manga series was so hyped up, and seeing as how it has really good reviews and people who love it, I don't get it. Like, I feel like I'm missing something, but that's the thing, is I don't think I am. I don't think I am missing anything. I think that's the entire point, is that it's short vignettes that don't amount to anything, and people find that creepy. And honestly, I don't find it creepy. I don't find it enjoyable. I made an entire video about why horror is comforting to me, and I don't find it comforting. The entire series just feels kind of lazy, and the reason why is because it just feels like the author had an idea for a chapter, and it was like, oh, what if there was a weird face? What if there was a person who was being haunted, and then they saw something weird? What if there was a strange shadow or a strange creature? But the thing is that, like, nothing happens. The characters don't really carry over from vignette to vignette, and so as a result, it feels more like I just went online and I read a bunch of comments. Like, it has the feeling of reading a Reddit thread, and this is a really weird comparison, but stick with me, because I'm sure I'll be able to find an example for this video. Like, I'm sure there's a thread out there where it's like, what's the creepiest thing that's ever happened to you? And then each person comments with their own experience, and this is what that feels like. It just feels like there are 1,000 different things going on, and none of it comes together. And it's not the way that a series should be. Especially considering that, like I said, there's this entire God plot, but nothing happens, there's no payoff, nothing ever comes from it, it never amounts to anything, and the entire thing is just frustrating. Whenever I finished reading this final volume, I was just like, is that it? Is that it? Like, nothing happened. And I think that what's perhaps most frustrating about this is that there is potential. Some of these stories actually have really cool ideas. So for instance, one of my favorites is about this boy who can see shadows above people's houses. And this boy sees these shadows, and he can always tell whenever someone in that household is about to die, because the shadow gets flipped upside down. And then one day the boy comes to his friend and says, I gotta go, we're leaving. And the friend goes, huh, why? That's weird. And the boy goes, I'm leaving and you should leave too. And then the chapter just ends with a shot of the entire city, and all the shadows on everyone's houses are flipped upside down, implying that everyone in the city is about to die. And I found that in and of itself to be a really effective short story. But the issue is that, again, the majority of stories throughout this series are not like that. Most of the stories are as simple as there is a person and they see something weird. That's where the horror is supposed to come from. There's a story in the last omnibus where it's basically about a girl who sees a ghost dog, and the ghost dog barks and it wakes her up in the middle of the night, and there's a fire in the kitchen, and basically if the ghost dog hadn't woken the girl up, then the fire would have burned down the house and killed the entire family. The girl talks to a neighbor, and the neighbor goes, oh yeah, that was the ghost of a dog who lived there who's trying to protect its previous owner, because the house had burned down previously and the owner had gotten burned severely, and basically the dog died in the fire. And so there's a kind of nice wholesome story there. And that's the thing, is that if the entire series were like that, if it were just short stories, if it were just like that, then I think the series would be really good. I think it could be great. But it's not like that, because again, every story is just, I went back home from work and there's someone weird there. Or there are so many stories where it's like, I looked out the window and there was someone staring at me. And anytime I look through the window, they're still staring at me. Like, there's this fear of constant surveillance, but it feels more and more like we live in a surveillance state now. And so the idea of someone weird watching you isn't even that strange, because that's probably freaking happening. I mean, if you have a social media account, or if you have a public profile, a YouTube channel, then yeah, there's probably someone weird looking at you. So that concept isn't really that scary, because that's just life now, I think. But really, it does kind of feel to me like the artist just wanted to draw some cool stuff, and that's cool. But if you're presenting it as a manga, then there has to be story to go along with it. If you want to draw cool stuff, make an art book and I'll support you. But as it currently stands, PTSD Radio is just a bunch of nothing. It's 1,000 pages of nothing. Like, you know it's bad whenever the most interesting thing that's happened for 200 pages is the manga artist stopping the story to tell his own story of how he woke up and had weird blood blisters in his mouth. There are several chapters about that, about how the artist feels like he was haunted during the making of this manga. But as someone who one time made a video called Ghosts Are Chumps, I don't really find it all that scary. Mostly because I still stand by that, ghosts are chumps. And again, there are some really cool ideas scattered throughout here, but they're not really explored. There's one chapter wherein people are hearing this weird sound on the roof late at night, and you learn this information at one point that there were these gods that took the form of snakes that were protecting the people, and basically they would hide in thatched roofs. But since everyone lives in a big building now, they still live in the roof, but they're just not in thatched roofs, and so they're harder to see and access. And long story short, because the people are hearing these weird sounds, the landlord puts down some poison, and it's implied that the gods eat the poison and may have been killed off by the poison. And that story just ends with the question, did we just kill the gods protecting this place? And that's a very haunting question. That's very scary. And so I wish that had been the start of something. And so all in all, this is just a really frustrating series, and I can't believe I read 3 omnibuses of it. People were complaining about this series online, and I saw some comments responding to them where they're like, this is just how Japanese horror is. It's just, it just, you know, starts and stops immediately. But I don't really think so. I think there's a lot of really great Japanese horror out there. Some of Junji Ito's works do have this problem where they cut off right as they're getting interesting. And so I do think that's fair, but I think that literally any one of his stories, even the one about the freaking fake poop, even that story seems to have more of a plot than the majority of vignettes or chapters in PTSD Radio. By the way, the fact it's called PTSD Radio, that makes it sound like it's going to be psychological. That makes it sound like it's going to be a series dealing with trauma and maybe dealing with real life pain, but it's not. It's literally just, oh, a weird face. And so I think this series sucks. Thank you for watching. I'm gonna eat more cough drops. All right, bye.